Stephanie White grabbing Caitlin Clark by the arm. Caitlin Clark saying, "Get your hands off me." Brianne January grabbing Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark saying, "Get your hands off me." Folks, do you know what I see when I look at the Indiana Fever?
We were a little gassed in that fourth quarter too, but at the same time, I thought for the most part, we did a really good job of handling the ball, and then once we got in the quarter court, moving the ball.
Steph Ty Harris stepping in, 7 assists, 0 turnovers, and overall it felt like you guys moved it well.
Yeah.
In general, what did you like about what you were able to get done?
Did you just watch that? Did you just watch a professional head coach stand at a podium and try to explain away a mandatory league reporting failure with an answer that somehow creates more questions than it resolves? Because I watched it. I watched every single second of it. And I need you to understand right now that what you just saw is not a communication miscommunication or an administrative oversight or an honest mistake made by a busy coaching staff managing a complicated injury situation. What you just watched is the surface of something that goes much deeper and much darker than anything the mainstream sports media is willing to say out loud about this Indiana Fever organization. Welcome to AJ Street Hub. I am your host AJ Le Maestro, and if this is your first time finding this channel, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now before another second of this video plays. We are grinding toward our 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single person who joins this community is part of something real. We do not regurgitate corporate press releases over here. We do not soften the truth to protect relationships with front offices. We read the actual rules, examine the actual evidence, and tell you exactly what the facts add up to, whether the people in power want you to hear it or not. Now let us get into what happened in Indianapolis on Wednesday night, because this story has layers and every single one of them is worse than the one before it. Let me start with the basic facts, because the foundation of this entire story is built on a very specific and very documented institutional failure. As tip-off approached for the Indiana Fever's home matchup against the expansion Portland Fire at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, a last-minute announcement pulled Caitlin Clark from the active roster approximately 1 hour before the game began. The official explanation that filtered through to local media described a sudden onset of back stiffness, framing the decision as conservative, medically responsible player management. And on the surface, if you do not know how the WNBA's injury reporting system actually works, that explanation sounds reasonable. Back stiffness is real. Precautionary rest is real. Responsible player management is real. The problem, and this is the part that blows the entire story apart, is that the WNBA's own collective bargaining agreement contains strict mandatory language about exactly when and how teams are required to report injuries to the league. According to independent basketball analysts and sports researchers who have documented this specific rule, including detailed breakdowns shared across basketball research accounts on social media, WNBA teams are contractually required to submit their complete injury, illness, and rest designations to the league office by 5 o'clock in the afternoon local time the day before any scheduled game. This is not a courtesy. This is not a recommendation. This is not a guideline that teams are encouraged to follow when convenient. This is a binding contractual obligation with the explicit purpose of protecting competitive integrity and ensuring that fans have accurate information before they make financial decisions about attending games. The only exception written into the language of that rule covers the second night of a back-to-back schedule. And the Portland Fire game was absolutely, definitively, unambiguously not the second night of a back-to-back. The Fever had a full calendar day to assess their roster and comply with their reporting obligations. So here is the question that this entire situation comes down to, and it is a very simple question. What did the Indiana Fever's official injury report submitted to the league office by 5 o'clock the day before the Portland game say about Caitlin Clark? The answer is nothing. Clark was not listed anywhere on that mandatory paperwork. No designation. No participation warning. No medical classification of any kind. The most commercially valuable player in the history of women's basketball was kept completely off the official league reporting documentation, while families across Indiana and neighboring states were making travel decisions based on the expectation that she would be on the floor. And that is where this stops being a basketball story and starts being something else entirely. Let me walk you through the real-world consequences of that omission because I think it is important that you understand exactly who gets hurt when a front office makes this kind of calculation. Secondary ticket market prices for this matchup were elevated significantly because the market fully expected Clark to be in the starting lineup. Families made long-distance travel plans. Parents booked hotel rooms, arranged childcare, bought gas, and organized entire midweek trips for their kids to see the most exciting player in women's basketball play live in person. Those families showed up at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. They paid for parking. They bought arena food at arena prices. They purchased merchandise from the team store. Every ticket was scanned at the turnstile. All of that revenue was safely collected. And then, only after every dollar was in the register, did the arena loudspeaker announce that Clark was out. Now I want you to think about the timing of that announcement very carefully because according to analysts who have dissected the chain of events surrounding this game, the timing is the smoking gun. There is a legally recognized term in consumer protection law for the practice of knowingly marketing a premium product to attract customer spending and then delivering an inferior version only after the purchase cannot be refunded. It is called bait and switch. And while I am not here to make specific legal predictions about what happens next, I will tell you that the deliberate sequence of events on Wednesday night, market the star, collect the money, announce the absence, follows that pattern so precisely that the front office cannot credibly claim it was unintentional. If Clark's back stiffness had been properly reported by 5 o'clock the day before as the rules require, every single revenue stream for Wednesday night would have looked dramatically different. Season ticket holders might have stayed home. Walk-up ticket buyers would have hesitated. Secondary market prices would have declined. The sold-out crowd the organization announced would have been a different size at a different price point. Management made a financial calculation. And the calculation they made was that swallowing whatever fine the league issues for an injury reporting violation was cheaper than the revenue loss that would have come from honest and timely disclosure. That is not a basketball operations decision. That is a boardroom decision. And it deserves to be called exactly what it is. But here is where I need to tell you that the injury reporting failure, as significant as it is on its own, is not even the most alarming part of this story. Because there is a separate thread of documented evidence suggesting that the real reason Clark was sidelined against Portland has nothing to do with back stiffness and everything to do with something happening inside this franchise that the front office desperately does not want examined publicly. A viral sideline video from the game immediately preceding the Portland matchup captured something that requires zero interpretation and zero spin to understand. Cameras caught head coach Stephanie White and assistant coach Brian January in what can only be described as a highly tense, physically charged confrontation with Caitlin Clark on the sideline during a timeout. As documented by broadcast footage that spread rapidly across basketball social media immediately after the game, Clark can be seen forcefully pulling away from the coaching staff, tuning out their direction, and responding with visible anger that goes significantly beyond any normal competitive sideline exchange. That is not a coach making an adjustment and a player processing it. That is a generational talent who has reached a breaking point expressing it in real time on a nationally broadcast game. In any healthy professional sports organization, when a superstar player and coaching staff reach that kind of visible public tension point, the immediate organizational priority is de-escalation, honest internal conversation, and finding a collective path forward. You sit down. You hash out the real issues. You figure out whether the people in the building are actually aligned on where this team is going. What you do not do, if you are a competent professional front office, is respond with what the leaked practice facility photos suggest happen next. According to photos from the Fever's private practice facility that circulated across basketball media in the days following that sideline incident, Clark's positioning during practice sessions tells a story that completely contradicts the official medical narrative. Where she was physically standing relative to the rest of the roster and coaching staff during those sessions is, to put it plainly, not where a player managing routine back stiffness would be positioned. She was isolated, removed from the flow of team drills, separated from the standard practice structure in a way that looks far less like medical precaution and far more like a corporate disciplinary measure dressed up in the language of athlete care. And this is the part one need to be direct about because I think it is critical. When a player is genuinely managing back tightness or physical fatigue, the standard professional protocol keeps that player engaged with the team at every level that their physical condition allows. They are on the baseline talking through defensive assignments. They are on the treatment table adjacent to the court. They are walking through playbook scenarios with coaches and teammates. They are present and connected even when they are not physically participating in drills. What those photos described was something different. What those photos described was an organizational timeout. A franchise sending its most important player a message about what happens when you publicly challenge the authority of the coaching staff. And masking that message behind the medically unassailable language of precautionary rest. When you connect those three things, the failure to file the mandatory injury report, the documented sideline confrontation, and the practice facility isolation, the back stiffness narrative does not just become questionable. It collapses completely. Now let me address the way the mainstream sports media has been covering the outcome of the Portland Fire game itself, because this is where I have a very specific and very pointed criticism of how this story has been framed. The Indiana Fever beat the Portland Fire 90-73. And right on schedule, the traditional sports outlets started running a narrative suggesting that this result somehow proves the Fever are more efficient, more balanced, and more dangerous without Clark in the lineup. I want to address that argument clearly and directly. The Portland Fire is a first-year expansion franchise. They are a collection of players assembled through an expansion draft, with no established defensive chemistry, no accumulated film preparation, and no roster depth to manage a full professional game at an elite level. Beating a brand new expansion team at home by 17 points with your franchise superstar sitting in street clothes does not prove your backup lineup is superior. It proves that first-year expansion teams are vulnerable to experienced WNBA rosters, which is a statement about the Portland Fire and not a statement about the Indiana Fever's optimal personnel configuration. As reported by multiple analysts who reviewed the actual game footage rather than just the final score, the offensive execution during that win was not a demonstration of superior ball movement or tactical flexibility. It was a demonstration of an experienced team with superior depth imposing its will on an opponent that was not yet capable of defending at the level required to compete. Aaliyah Boston had an outstanding individual performance, 24 points and 8 rebounds, and she absolutely deserves credit for looking like her dominant self immediately after returning from her own injury situation. But individual excellence against a weak defensive front does not answer the fundamental question of whether this team can compete at the level required to challenge the New York Liberty or the Las Vegas Aces in a playoff environment. It does not. And using a comfortable home win against an expansion team as evidence that the franchise is better without its franchise player is the kind of misleading framing that I find genuinely irresponsible from outlets that present themselves as serious sports journalism. And then there is the crowd energy evidence that nobody in the mainstream wants to actually discuss because it undermines the feel-good narrative around the win. Broadcast footage from inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse during that game captured an arena atmosphere that was, by every honest assessment, completely different from what Indiana Fever home games have looked like over the past 2 years. The electricity that defined those games during the height of the Clark era, the noise, the engagement, the raw passion of a fan base that felt like it was watching something genuinely historic unfold, was absent. What the cameras captured instead was a packed building full of people who showed up expecting one thing and received something else, and who processed that disappointment in the most visible way possible. They sat quietly. The atmosphere was flat. And you cannot manufacture genuine crowd energy with arena speakers and promotional giveaways. Real crowd energy is the product of trust between a franchise and its fan base. It is the product of fans feeling like the organization is honest with them, respects them, and is genuinely trying to give them what they came to see. When fans feel like they have been misled, that trust breaks. And when trust breaks in a sports market, it does not repair itself because the team wins a midweek game against a first-year expansion program. It repairs itself through accountability, transparency, and demonstrated organizational change. Right now, the Indiana Fever front office is showing zero accountability on any of those fronts. And those quiet stands in the third quarter of a game the team won by 17 points are the most honest assessment of where the relationship between this franchise and its fan base currently stands. Now let me talk about the legal and institutional exposure this organization has created for itself, because Stephanie White's press conference response to James Boyd's questions about the injury reporting timeline did not help the situation. It made it significantly worse. According to the broadcast of that press conference that circulated through basketball media, White argued that not every player who misses a practice session or takes a day off from team activities needs to appear on the official league injury report, and that the coaching staff fully expected Clark to be available for Wednesday's game right up until the final determination was made. That explanation has a fundamental problem. If a player is experiencing back stiffness severe enough that she cannot participate in practice less than 24 hours before tip-off, the professional standard in every sport at every level is to list that player on the injury report with whatever designation accurately reflects her status. You do not leave the league's most commercially significant player completely off the official paperwork and then announce her absence 1 hour before the game starts. The WNBA's injury reporting obligations, according to analysts who have reviewed the collective bargaining agreement language, extend beyond the formal 5 o'clock submission to the league office. They also encompass the requirement that team representatives communicate honestly and accurately with media whenever player availability is discussed publicly. When a head coach's public statements conflict with the documented timeline of what was happening inside the organization, that conflict is itself evidence of a reporting violation. And the WNBA has both the authority and the institutional obligation to investigate this situation thoroughly. The integrity of the betting markets, the fairness to the television broadcast partners who sell advertising around the expectation of specific player appearances, and the basic respect owed to the fans who purchase tickets based on publicly available roster information all depend on the league enforcing these rules with genuine consequences. A historic fine is the minimum appropriate response. Whether the investigation reveals deeper organizational misconduct will determine what comes after that. And ultimately all of this lands at the feet of the Simon family ownership group, because every institutional failure in this organization flows from decisions made or allowed at the ownership level. Let me be direct about the business reality here. Having Caitlin Clark under contract with the Indiana Fever is the most commercially valuable player partnership in the history of women's professional sports. The television ratings, the merchandise sales, the sponsorship revenue, the road game attendance surges that force opposing venues to expand their capacity, all of it is documented, all of it is real, and all of it is tied directly to Clark's name on the active roster. According to league insiders who cover the business side of the WNBA, Clark's posture regarding a long-term extension with Indiana has quietly shifted from what was described as a near certainty to something considerably more cautious and non-committal. She has reportedly declined to engage with early extension conversations, keeping her options open in a way that suggests she is watching how this organization handles its current crisis very carefully before making any long-term commitment. In professional sports, when a generational talent refuses to commit to the team that holds her rights, she is not being indecisive. She is sending a communication. She is watching whether the people in charge are capable of building the kind of environment where she can actually win and actually thrive. And right now, the Indiana Fever are failing that test in front of an audience that is paying very close attention. The window to fix this is not unlimited. Every incident, every unexplained absence, every defensive press conference, every leaked practice photo, and every flat crowd in a stadium full of people who feel misled narrows that window a little further. The Fever have to decide whether they are going to protect the coaching staff's ego and the front office's procedural convenience, or whether they are going to make the organizational changes necessary to keep the most important player in the history of their franchise from walking out the door when her contract expires. Because based on everything that has happened in the past week, they are currently choosing wrong. That is the complete breakdown, people. The injury reporting failure is documented. The sideline confrontation is on camera. The practice isolation is in photos. The crowd energy collapse is in the broadcast footage. And the business consequences of losing Caitlin Clark are so catastrophic for this franchise that the ownership group should be having emergency meetings every single day until the situation is resolved properly. We covered every layer of it right here on AJ Street Hub because this is exactly what this channel exists